On April 25th, 2026, at 8:42 a.m. local time, inside a secured compound in Islamabad, a convoy arrives without announcement. No press, no cameras, just movement. Inside that convoy, U.S. envoys. Among them, Steve Witkoff, signal number 1. Because their arrival means one thing. The window is still open? Barely. Here's what nobody is telling you. These talks are not direct, not face-to-face, not even in the same room. On one side of the compound, the American delegation prepares briefing documents. On the other side, the Iranian team waits, led by Abbas Araghchi, but they are not meeting. Not yet. Because between them, there's only one connection, one person, the courier, the third person in the room, the one carrying every message, the one shaping how each side hears the other. But we'll come back to him. Because by 8:57 a.m., another signal appears. Araghchi's convoy enters the city. Timing, precise. Distance from the U.S. compound, less than 6 kilometers. Close, but separated. Signal number 2. Because proximity does not mean agreement. It means pressure. And pressure is rising. But here's the catch. Iran has not committed to talks. Not formally, not publicly. And that hesitation is critical. Because without commitment, there is no negotiation, only positioning. By 9:14 a.m., the first message moves. Not written, spoken. Delivered through the courier from the U.S. side. A unified proposal is ready. Signal number 3. Because this introduces something new, a single framework, a potential deal. But here's the catch. Iran has not accepted it, not even close. Because from Tehran's perspective, the conditions are wrong. The blockade remains, pressure continues, and negotiations under pressure are not negotiations, they are demands. By 9:31 a.m., the Iranian response is delivered. Short, careful, non-committal. We are reviewing. Signal number 4, because this is not acceptance. But it is not rejection. It is delay. And delay is a strategy. But here's the catch. Delay increases risk. Because outside Islamabad, the situation is not paused, it is escalating. In the Strait of Hormuz, naval forces remain active. Shipping remains restricted. Oil markets remain unstable because pressure is being applied in real time, and that pressure feeds back into the talks. By 10:02 a.m., another signal emerges. Internal friction. Inside Iran, hardliners within the IRGC are pushing against any deal. They argue that the U.S. cannot be trusted, that pressure must be resisted. The concessions now would show weakness, while others within the diplomatic team push for engagement, for avoiding escalation, for finding a path forward. And that division is now decisive, because whichever side wins determines what happens next. But here's the catch. The U.S. has its own internal pressure, because the longer talks stall, the less effective the strategy becomes, and strategies that lose effectiveness are replaced. By 10:28 a.m., the courier moves again, faster this time, because the messages are becoming sharper, more urgent, less flexible. From the U.S., time is limited, signal number 5, because this introduces urgency, artificial urgency, but effective, because time pressure forces decisions. But here's the catch. Pressure can also backfire because too much pressure breaks negotiation instead of accelerating it. By 10:56 a.m., the regional picture tightens. Military readiness increases. Naval patrols intensify because while diplomats talk, forces prepare. And preparation is not neutral. It signals expectation. Signal number 6, because when preparation increases, the system is moving closer to action. But here's the catch. Action is not inevitable. Not yet. Because the diplomatic channel still exists, still active, still functioning. Barely. By 11:21 a.m., a leak appears, unconfirmed but specific. It suggests a phased agreement, partial easing of pressure. In exchange for limited commitments. Not a full deal, but a start. Signal number 7. Because this is the first real opening, a narrow path forward. But here's the catch. That path is fragile, because it depends on trust. And trust is limited on both sides. By 11:47 a.m., the system pauses, not visibly, but structurally, because decisions are being made, not communicated yet, but forming. And those decisions will determine everything. Because within the next 24 to 72 hours, the outcome will lock in. Either the talks move forward and pressure stabilizes, or they don't. And escalation begins. And if escalation begins, it will not stay contained. It will spread across the region, across markets, across alliances, rapidly, unpredictably, irreversibly. So now everything comes down to one question. Not whether talks will happen, but whether they will succeed. Because the next move will decide everything. Deal or deadlock, stability or escalation, negotiation or conflict, peace or war. 11:58 a.m. local time. Inside the secured diplomatic compound in Islamabad, a revised document is printed. 12 pages, 3 sections, security guarantees, economic relief, phased compliance. Signal number 8. Because this is no longer a draft, it's a framework. A structure both sides can respond to. But here's the catch. Frameworks don't solve disagreements, they expose them. By 12:07 p.m., the courier picks up the document. No delay, no review. Because timing now matters more than wording. Every minute counts, every delay adds pressure, and pressure is already at its peak. He crosses the compound, 2 buildings, less than 200 meters apart. But politically, miles away. By 12:11 p.m., the document is delivered to the Iranian side. No discussion, no explanation, just transfer, because interpretation happens inside the room, not outside it. Signal number 9, because now the process shifts again from movement to evaluation. An evaluation introduces something dangerous, time. But here's the catch. Time is exactly what they don't have. Because outside Islamabad, the situation is not waiting. In the Strait of Hormuz, naval presence remains high. Shipping continues, but slower. Insurance rates continue rising. Oil prices remain unstable, because uncertainty is still active, still spreading. That's the chain reaction, and it's already underway. By 12:26 p.m. inside the Iranian room, the first reactions emerge. Quiet, measured, but divided. One group focuses on the economic section. Sanctions relief, revenue access, timeline clarity. Another group focuses on security guarantees, verification, compliance, control. And a third group, the hardliners, focus on something else entirely, leverage. Because from their perspective, any deal must preserve leverage, not reduce it. Signal number 10. Because this is where internal friction becomes decisive. Not public, not visible, but critical. But here's the catch. The U.S. side has its own internal divide, because not everyone agrees on how far to go. Some want faster agreement, others want stronger terms. And that difference affects every line in the proposal. By 12:44 p.m., the first response begins forming. Not final, not complete, but directionally clear. Concerns raised, conditions added, language adjusted, because this is not acceptance, it's negotiation. And negotiation takes time. But here's the catch. Time is exactly what the system cannot absorb anymore, because every hour without resolution increases external pressure. By 1:03 p.m., the courier moves again, document in hand, response partially written, not finalized. But enough to continue. Signal number 11. Because movement, even incomplete movement, keeps the process alive. But here's the catch. Movement alone is not progress, because direction matters, and direction is still uncertain. By 1:19 p.m., the USUC side receives the response, reads it, processes it, and immediately identifies the problem. Too many conditions, too many adjustments, too much distance from the original framework, because what was proposed as a path forward is now being reshaped, and reshaping creates friction. Signal number 12, because every added condition makes agreement harder, not easier. But here's the catch. Removing conditions is just as difficult, because each one represents a concern, a risk, a political calculation. By 1:36 p.m., the system tightens again, messages move faster, responses shorten, language sharpens, because patience is decreasing on both sides. And when patience drops, decisions accelerate. By 1:52 p.m., another leak appears, unconfirmed but credible. It suggests a limited interim deal is being considered, a short-term arrangement, not comprehensive but stabilizing, enough to reduce pressure, enough to keep talks alive. Signal number 13. Because this is the first real sign of convergence, not agreement, but alignment. But here's the catch. Interim deals are temporary. They delay problems. They don't resolve them. By 2:11 p.m., internal pressure inside Iran peaks again. Hardliners push back, arguing that even a temporary deal signals weakness, that pressure must be resisted. That time favors Iran, while others argue the opposite, that delay increases risk, that escalation benefits no one, that a temporary deal is better than no deal. And that argument is now the deciding factor. Signal number 14. Because whichever side wins this internal debate will determine the outcome. But here's the catch. The same debate exists on the U.S. side. Different arguments, same tension, speed versus strength, agreement versus leverage. And that balance is unstable. By 2:34 p.m., the courier moves again, faster than before. Because now, timing is critical. Every exchange is measured in minutes, not hours, because the window is closing rapidly. By 2:52 p.m., the system reaches another pause, short but heavy, because this pause is not inactivity. It's calculation, final calculation, costs, risks, outcomes, because both sides now understand the stakes. And those stakes are no longer regional. They are global. Because what happens here affects everything else: markets, energy, alliances, stability. And once those systems shift, they do not easily return. So now everything comes down to the next decision. Not a statement, not a message, a decision. Accept the framework and stabilize the situation. Or reject it and risk escalation, because there is no third path left, not anymore. And within the next 24 to 72 hours, that decision will be made. Either the talks move forward and the system stabilizes, or they collapse and the next phase begins. And if that phase begins, it will not be controlled. It will expand across the region, across markets, across alliances, fast, unpredictable, irreversible. Because once the balance breaks, it doesn't reset, it shifts. So now the question is no longer whether talks will happen. They already are. The question is whether they will succeed, because the next move will decide everything: deal or deadlock, stability or escalation, negotiation or conflict, peace or war. 3:07 p.m. local time. Inside a secured conference room in Islamabad, both delegations stop sending messages. No courier movement, no documents exchanged, no updates, just stillness. Signal number 15. Because stillness at this stage is not calm, it's calculation. Here's what nobody's telling you. This is the moment where negotiations stop being about proposals and start becoming about consequences. Because both sides now understand exactly what happens next. If they move forward, pressure eases. If they don't, everything escalates. And that clarity changes behavior. By 3:19 p.m., inside the Iranian delegation room, the discussion narrows, no longer broad, no longer theoretical, focused, binary. Accept the interim framework or reject it, because delay is no longer sustainable. Signal number 16, because the system has reached its limit. But here's the catch. Acceptance is not simple, because accepting the framework means adjusting position, reducing leverage, taking political risk, and those risks are not evenly distributed. Inside Iran, hardliners push back harder than before. They argue that accepting now, under pressure, sets a precedent, that it invites more pressure later, that it weakens long-term positioning, while others argue the opposite, that rejecting now triggers escalation, that escalation carries far greater risk, and that a temporary deal creates space, time, options, and that argument is no longer abstract. It is immediate, because the decision must be made now, not later. By 3:36 p.m. inside the U.S. side of the compound, a similar conversation is happening, different details, same structure, accept adjustments, or push back. Because from the U.S. perspective, too many concessions weaken leverage, too few concessions risk collapse, and that balance is unstable. Signal number 17, because both sides are facing the same problem, different positions, same pressure. But here's the catch. Pressure does not produce perfect outcomes. It produces fast decisions. And fast decisions carry risk. By 3:52 p.m., the courier is called back, not to carry a message, to wait. Because the next message will not be incremental, it will be decisive. And that's why it hasn't been sent yet. Because once it's sent, there is no easy reversal. By 4:08 p.m., outside the compound, the regional situation remains unchanged. Naval presence steady, shipping cautious, markets volatile. Because the external pressure is holding constant, not increasing, not decreasing. Just sustained, and sustained pressure forces resolution, one way or another. Signal number 18. Because the system cannot hold this position indefinitely, it must shift. But here's the catch. The direction of that shift is still unknown. By 4:26 p.m., the silence breaks. The courier moves again, slowly this time, deliberately, because the message he carries is final, not a proposal, not a draft, a position, clear, defined. And once delivered, everything changes. By 4:31 p.m., the U.S. delegation receives the response, reads it, processes it, and immediately understands what it means, because it answers the only question left: move forward or not. Signal number 19. Because this is the turning point. But here's the catch. Even now, nothing is public. No announcement, no confirmation. Because decisions are revealed slowly, through actions, through adjustments, through what happens next. By 4:47 p.m., the first visible signal appears. Subtle, but critical. A delay in scheduled naval repositioning. Not canceled, delayed. Because delay, in this context, means reassessment. And reassessment means movement, not full agreement. but movement. Signal number 20. Because movement is the first step towards stabilization. But here's the catch. Movement is not the same as resolution. Because even if the framework is accepted, it is temporary, limited, conditional, and conditions must still be met. By 5:06 p.m., the second signal appears. A slight adjustment in messaging. Language softens. Tone shifts. Because when tone changes, direction follows. And direction now appears to be moving away from immediate escalation, but not far. Because the system remains fragile, extremely fragile. By 5:22 p.m., global markets react again, not dramatically, but noticeably. Because even the possibility of stabilization reduces uncertainty, and reduced uncertainty stabilizes behavior, temporarily. But here's the catch. Temporary stability is not permanent, because if conditions fail, if commitments are not met, the system snaps back, often faster than before. By 5:39 p.m., the process shifts again, from decision to execution. Because now the question is no longer what to do, it's how to do it. And execution introduces new risks, delays, misinterpretations, breakdowns. Because even agreed frameworks can fail in implementation. Signal number 21. Because the hardest part is not reaching agreement, it's sustaining it. But here's the catch. Sustainability requires trust, and trust is still limited on both sides. So now the next 24 to 72 hours take on a new meaning. Not just decision, validation. Because what happens next will confirm whether this moment was a turning point or just a pause. Either the framework holds, pressure eases, shipping stabilizes, markets calm, and talks continue, or it doesn't. Conditions fail, pressure returns, and escalation begins. And if escalation begins, it will not stay contained. It will expand across the Gulf, across global energy markets, across alliances, fast, unpredictable, irreversible. Because once the system breaks, it does not reset. It shifts permanently. So now everything comes down to one final reality. The decision has been made, but the outcome has not. Because the outcome depends on what happens next. And what happens next will decide everything. Deal or breakdown. Stability or escalation. Execution or failure. Peace or war. Peace.